Josh Friedman from the Daily Journal and Courier-Post. He was out there at Region 8 last night. We're going to get an update from him. How's it going, Josh?
Not too bad. How you doing?
Pretty good, man. You ready for a long day of wrestling?
I think I'm in for it.
Yeah. got a cup of coffee this morning. Get your make sure your laptop's fired up.
You know, I'm one of the weird guys. I don't drink any coffee, so I'm all natural.
I'm the same way. I've never got into coffee. I go with chocolate milk on the morning, like a 5-year-old.
I'm a Honey Nut Cheerios guy myself.
There you go. Give us some of your reaction from last night. Obviously, some of the teams you cover on a weekly basis. Buena Regional, St. Augustine Prep had some good nights. What was your takeaway from the quarterfinals on Friday night?
You know, a lot of standard stuff. You know, the top seeds all advanced. There weren't too many huge upsets, but there was some great action. Some of the interesting things I saw especially from the Cape Atlantic League, were at 138 pounds, where Cedar Creek's Andrew Solomon and Oakcrest Callisto Kraus both got upset pretty much at the buzzer, which were very entertaining matches. It's tough for them, and both now have to wrestle back to try and get to third in Atlantic City. So that was probably a little tough for them. Those are two big surprises for me personally, but a lot of really everything else kind of held court for the most part.
Yeah, real interesting wrestleback matchup between Solomon and Bishop now. Those two guys faced off in the semis, District 32. So going to be a tough matchup for Justin Bishop, who's a 100-match winner. He's a senior, so he's looking to keep his season alive. So that should be one of the interesting matches in the wrestlebacks today. As you got, I guess, semifinals kick off around 10, and then we're going to have a bunch of wrestlebacks to try to see who can nail down that third position in each weight class.
Yeah, that's correct. Semifinals are on two of the mats at 10, and then in the middle of the mat, our wrestlebacks are kind of going on concurrently. So, but you're right. The Bishop Solomon match for me is actually probably the most interesting wrestleback there is, at least that I saw, kind of grazing through those bouts.
And it really makes it tough on a guy who lost on Friday night, because you might have to win a couple of matches to get into that third place match. How tough is that for these guys when you're coming off that loss Friday night? You got to turn right around and wrestle real tough for a couple of matches just to have a shot to advance.
Yeah, I mean, you got to win 3 times, and I don't think any wrestler will tell you that's easy. These guys, it's a disappointment not to make the semifinals. It's late Friday night, and you come back Saturday morning, and you're wrestling all day. Back to back to back. Those that can get it done, more power to them. You've seen it before, but it's rare, and usually you have to go through someone who you might have lost to, either during the regular season or maybe in this tournament to get there. So these guys have a long way to get back, and but we'll see how they do. One or two, you could see maybe one or two pulling it off, but we'll see what happens.
And one of the themes of this region is the dominance in the lower to middle weights of Clearview. I mean, you're talking about guys like Mike Van Brill, Stanley Atkinson, Zach Firestone, sort of in that 138 to 152 range. These guys have had incredible seasons. I don't know if anybody can really knock those 3 guys off the top spot of the podium today.
Yeah, it's Firestone at 32 and Van Brill at 38 are pretty clear favorites. I think Atkinson's definitely a favorite at 45, but he'll have a little work today. He's got Pittman's Tyler Bear in the semis, a 100-match winner. He just won his 100th yesterday. He's 34-1 this year. He's good. If he gets by him, he'll have possibly either St. Augustine's Dylan Taylor or Buena's Tim Souter. Both guys, I think, can give him at least a little of a challenge. So I think he'll have a little more work to do. He's definitely the favorite, but I wouldn't count any of those other guys out. The other guy that I think has a pretty clear path is at 126, Kingsway's Quinn Kinner, who's just a machine, and he's definitely going to be a heavy favorite to win at 126. So the 26 to 38 bouts, I think, are pretty clearly, the 3 top seeds are heavy favorites.
Yeah, and talk about a guy like Tim Souter from Buena Regional had a real nice night last night. He took down a guy, John D'Onofrio from Mainland, who just won his 100th match this week as well. So, what are his chances of maybe pulling the upset and winning that region title?
Souter's a good kid. I've talked to him plenty of times. His whole family is Paulsboro based. Several have won district championships and have had a lot of success over there at Paulsboro. And he's the only guy who went to Buena, and he's wrestled really, really well this year. He's got Dylan Taylor again in the semis. Taylor beat him 6-5 earlier this year. So it'll be a tight match. I'd favor Taylor in that one, but Souter can definitely get ahead. And obviously the winner of that match goes to Atlantic City, and that's what it's all about.
We're talking with Josh Friedman from the Daily Journal and Courier-Post. He's got his pulse on South Jersey wrestling. So we're going to try to get some breakdown from him for the next few minutes on Region 8. Josh, one of the more interesting weights to me is heavyweight. You have Antonio Rodriguez Abuna, the number 1 seed, but he might have some challenge from even a guy like Paul Valiant of Egg Harbor Township, who's been on a real nice run lately. Here's a guy, a real big kid, who kind of has dedicated himself to strictly wrestling over the last year or so, and it's really paying some dividends for him.
Yeah, Valiant's wrestled well this year. I believe I actually saw him the first week of the year at Southern. And if I'm not mistaken, I hope my memory serves me right, is he beat Delsey's Mark Cheney that day. And that's kind of when I first took notice of him. And he's had a very strong season, but at the same time, I really like Antonio Rodriguez in that weight class. He's so good. He had such a strong year last year making state. He's been dominant of late. I expect him to move on. I actually expect, Valiant had a nice year, but I think he's going to have a hard time with McClay Richmond over from Cumberland, another strong kid who really doesn't. He likes to get off the mat real fast. He pins a lot of guys. I think Valiant might have a tough time with McClay, honestly, in the semis.
Talk about 195 a little bit. That's one of the more interesting weight classes of this region. You saw Connor Agostino from Egg Harbor Township with a little bit of a controversial win over Frank Wyszynski. You have Colin Roberts with a victory last night. Those two guys, Agostino and Roberts, going to hook up in the semifinals for the 5th time. They're going to face each other in the last 2 years. So that's really become a nice little Atlantic County rivalry in the postseason the last 2 years or so. That's kind of a crazy weight class right there, 195.
Yeah, it was good. It looked pretty clustered when you looked at that bracket when it came out. I kind of always figured Agostino and Roberts would make it, but I talked to Frank Wyszynski last year. He's a great kid from Pennsville, and I knew that might have been the match right there that really would have been the turning point. And Agostino pulled it out. Like I said, a little controversy there, some questionable calls, or I think some people think some questionable calls at the end. But Agostino's wrestled so well this year, and he and Roberts, like you said, have had so many good battles. It's fun when those rivalries, materialize on the mat. Where kids are so familiar with each other. You know what the other's going to do, and you just hope to maybe catch them trying to make their move or not. And, Agostino, I believe, beat Roberts 8-3 in the district final last week. Mm-hmm. And I favor Agostino this week again. He's wrestled really well, and I expect him to go up against Wisconsin's Chad Watt in the final.
I wouldn't be surprised at all if Wyszynski wrestles back to take that 3rd spot. I mean, he really wrestled well against Agostino last night. Wrestled well enough to win, just didn't break right for him. But like you said, what a tough kid. I mean, he's got his head all taped up, and he's coming out there, coming after you. He was really the aggressor for the most part against Agostino.
Yeah, he really is. He's one of those kids that I remember every time I basically see him, he's shaking hands. He is so friendly to everyone around. I did a story on him last year where he had they thought he would never wrestle again because of head injuries, and last year he came back and made a run, and he won districts and got to regions, and it was a great story, and you always root for a kid like that, and you're absolutely right. He's definitely one of 3 or 4 kids I can see wrestling back in '95. I think he does get back Gordon, and then in the first round of wrestlebacks, and I absolutely believe he can make a run. I think it could come down to him, and if I had to make a pick, probably him and Colin Roberts would be my 2 picks to take 3rd in that weight class when it's all said and done.
We're talking with Josh Friedman of the Daily Journal and the Courier-Post. Does a great job covering high school wrestling. Josh, talk about some of these brother combinations we have going on. Obviously, the top story of the brother combinations is the Kinner boys from out there in Kingsway, Trace and Quinn. Trace at 120. Quinn at 126. I mean, these guys are both so good. They're both top seeds. And what a great story for those young men being able to kind of stick with your brother here throughout the entire postseason. And they've just been outstanding.
Yeah, they've happened since last year when Quinn came around. Obviously, Trace is a year older, but they both won region titles last year. Trace has a very good shot again this year. He's probably got a little tougher challenge than his brother does. At 120, he's got Abscanish James Geigel, who had a great win for himself yesterday against Patel Clearview. But Kinner will have either Anthony Duca from Paulsboro, or Delcy's Edison Echeverria in the finals, and that should be a pretty interesting match. But yeah, those two guys are just they just control their bouts. They're so strong. They have Trace has one loss this year. Quinn is one loss this year. I mean, those guys are they rarely find themselves in trouble, which is interesting because Trace actually found himself on his back early on. Was taken down early on last night against Highlands Justin Karras. And, it was a bit of a scare early on, and he wound up turning around and pinning him in the second period. So maybe that was the wake-up call he needed in this region tournament. And,
you talk about from Gateway, the Menino brothers, Dante and Antonio. And Antonio is a guy who's really impressed me the last couple of years. I mean, at 113, this is a guy who's such a tough matchup, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if he wins that region title and heads on to states. And have you seen much of these guys?
Yeah, I got to know them a little bit last year when they were freshmen at this very tournament. I got to watch them a little bit. And they're strong. Like you said, they're strong, and they both actually kind of struggled last year at this tournament. So I've been interested to see how they responded, and they've responded well. Antonio, I picked them both to win their weight classes this week. I think Antonio has a little easier path at 113. I think 106 is going to be a great final. I expect Dante to get by to the finals there, and I think if he gets whoever he gets, whether Highland Seth Henry or Paulsboro's Nick Duca, I think that's going to be one of the must-see finals of the night. I really like Highland Seth Henry. I think if he gets by Duca, that Menino Henry matchup could be fantastic.
Are those guys twins, the Meninos?
Yes.
Nice. So they've always had a training partner there.
Yeah, they're right next to each other in weight, so. It's always nice when you have that. Same thing with the Kinners. They're right next to each other in weight, so that always helps. And you're never, you don't have a big 50-pound difference where the one brother gets to beat up on the other.
Right. Real quick before we let you go, Josh, what should folks be looking out for once it comes down to finals?
For me, and I said this last week when we were talking District 31, 152 once again. I think is so interesting, no matter how it breaks down. I expect Delcy's Lorenzo Ruggiero to make it to the finals in the top half of the bracket, and then whoever wins down below, whether it's Buna's Mason Bressel or Clayton's Don DeMarco, whoever wins that match is going to make for one heck of a storyline, either the fifth bout between Ruggiero and Bressel, or you'll have Ruggiero and DeMarco, which is former teammates at Delcy. DeMarco transferred, at the middle of this year, which would be just either one of those storylines. I think it could be the storyline of the night in the finals at 152.
Nice. Good stuff, Josh. I'll see you out there later this afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dave.
You got it, man. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You too.
All right, that was Josh Friedman of the Daily Journal and Courier-Post. Does a great job. He'll be out there all day at Region 8.